So this is the interview with Uncle Albert, and we're doing it on the 7th of December 1991. So the rudest questions to start with, I need to know how old you are.
73.
73, which means you were born when?
1914. Almost the last year of the war, actually.
Right. And you were in Somerton now?
No, I was in Kent in those days. I lived in Kent until 1939, when Militia declared that some people should go into the army, and I was called up with the 1st Batch of Militia. 2 months later, war broke out, and instead of serving for 6 months with the army and 4.5 on the reserve, I was automatically drafted into the colours, which I served then for 1945.
No, I don't understand what colours are. Can you explain that to me?
In other words, the regular army.
Right.
We came under all the rules and regulations of a regular soldier.
Yeah. So what was your job then?
In those days, I was with the signal platoon of the 4th Battalion, the Buffs, the East Kents.
What does that mean? What signal platoon? What jobs?
Communications.
Right. So what was your job?
Any. We were still training, you see, really. We were still learning Morse code. In those days, we don't laugh, we were still learning semaphore.
Mm-hmm.
Wireless communication was something which was almost unheard of in 1939.
Mm-hmm. So you were learning what to tap it out, were you?
Yeah. Yes.
And was that your job then, when in wartime?
As a signaller, it was part of our job, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was never really put to the test. We had communication, yes, for telephone and what have you, but actual Morse code was never really put to the test at all.
Right. So just go back again and explain to me. You were called up to join the army.
I was called up to do 6 months as a reservist, a conscription act. But war broke out, which cancelled all that, and I was automatically drafted in as a full-time soldier.
Right. And where did you have to go to start with?
That was at Canterbury in Kent. We had until October 39 there, and then we were drafted to join the 4th Battalion, the Buffs, which was a territorial regiment. The group of militia joined them to make up a full battalion strength of something between 600 and 700. And within a month we were sent to France with the BEF.
The British Expeditionary Force.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were in the south of France from November to about mid-April, same time as Jerry broke through the Maginot Line. Then we were moved from the south of France right out through, and we travelled against the refugees that were fleeing south. And whenever you see refugees on the television today, it was something that comes back so vividly, because the first ones that you met were the ones that were driving their big Citroen cars, and then the ones that were on the smaller cars, and the ones that were with push bikes. And by the time we got up to the far end of the north of France, there were the ones there that were just struggling along with bag on the back and what have you.
But just explain to me again what your job was at that stage. Did you have a gun? Were you
oh yes, yeah. yes. We all had a gun. By that time, I was in B Company office as a clerk responsible for the particular company. Every company had a clerk, you see. You had headquarter company with the orderly room. Then you had A, B, C and D, and each company had a clerk responsible for day-to-day returns in general administration.
And how did you feel about going off to France and all that? Was it? Can you remember your feelings? Was it frightening, or were you proud, or what sort of?
Well, I think one has to say one's proud, John. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Frightened? No. Apprehensive? Yes, because you didn't know what was going to happen.
Mm. And then when you started seeing refugees, was that the first sort of sight of war?
First.
The results of
it.
it.
Yeah. And even then, we never really got mixed up with it. We were moving as a brigade, and a brigade is 3 battalions. We were the 3rd in the row. The first 2 got over the river bridge bridges at Aberville, and then they were bombed by Jerry, and we were on the wrong side. And immediately our battalion was despair. We had no command to answer to, nobody wanted us, and we wandered around. And during the period that we were wandering around, Dunkirk took place. And all the evacuations that happened at Dunkirk, we hadn't the faintest idea were going on.
So you were left
We came
stranded?
out a week after Dunkirk.
Came out?
Yes.
What, back to England?
Brought back to England, yeah.
Mm. So when did you go overseas again after that?
We had, that would be in June, I think it was June the 1st or June the 2nd, we actually got back to this country. We were sent down to the Welsh border, and we were down there until October, during which time I'd got married, Edna, and we had virtually a month together, and then we were sent to Malta. We landed in Malta on Remembrance Sunday, 1940. I remember that because we went out, we travelled out from Greenock on a commandeered liner, the Louis Pasteur. She'd been commandeered in Halifax and come over with one lot of Canadian troops. As a liner, she hadn't been fitted out as a trooper, and we went through to Gibraltar with her still as a liner, luxury travel. And we transshipped there onto the battleship Barham, and the Barham took us through to Malta. But one day out of Malta, we met the home fleet, the Hood, the Rodney, the Nelson, and the big boys, and they steamed round us as the Remembrance Day service was carried out on board our place. The divisions on the various ships as you were going round, you could hear "Oh God, I help in ages past" echoing round and round. That was something I should never forget. I remember it every Remembrance Sunday. It was so vivid.
Mm. And was there action going on around there as well?
The home fleet left us and went up, I think it was to Taranto Harbour, and shelled the harbour. The Italian fleet was in Taranto Harbour, and they went up and shelled them.
So you weren't seeing action?
We never saw anything of that. When we arrived on Malta, they'd had the first of the air raids. Mainly the Italian bombers were going over, but they bombed from about 25,000 feet. It wasn't a case of hitting the target, it was a case of hitting the island. But we heard the 500th siren go, and we heard the 5,000th siren go before we left the island.
Really? Why? What
Well,
kept you there?
Hmm?
What kept you there?
We were part of the garrison, you see, then.
In Malta?
In Malta, yeah.
So take me on then. What's the next?
From Malta, so we had just about the 3 years there. We went to Egypt, and we were put on so-called rest. It's a village called Sporting, just outside of Alexandria. Sporting was a village that was being built by the Egyptians to host the Olympic Games had they been held in 1940. They weren't. And it was used as a transit camp for soldiers in transit. We had roughly a month there, and I was actually on leave at the time when, in Alexandria, when every cafe carried the sign outside, such and such a unit returned to barracks immediately. And of course eventually it was 4th Battalion, the Buffs, returned to barracks immediately. We went back. By that time I was orderly room sergeant, and we found that we were ordered to Leros, an island up in the Dodecanese. We had 24 hours to get the battalion down because we were overnumbered. Get the battalion back to the 650, I think it was, at which we were allowed, and sailed from Alexandria. We sailed on the Eclipse, and the Eclipse was ill-fated. It never reached its destination. 2 days out, we ran into a minefield, and within a matter of 4 minutes, the Eclipse had completely disappeared. We had 196 of our boys, the Buffs, on board, and I was one of 33, I think it was, who got away with it. The rest were drowned. The accompanying destroyer was a Greek destroyer, I've forgotten her name, actually saw everything that happened. And
Well, you saw everything that happened.
yes, John. We had one almighty explosion. I was sitting on the lifebelt, and it tipped the destroyer onto its side. We had another explosion. That was the mine exploding. We had another explosion as the ship's magazine blew up, and that blew the destroyer straight in half. So to say that I saw anything would hardly be correct, because I did remember nothing really until I was some 50, 60 yards away from the destroyer and clinging to one of the old wicker signal baskets, signal pan, yes.
And you were actually in the water?
In the water, yes.
With a life jacket on?
No, I had no life jacket.
So that saved your life, clinging to it?
Yes, but of course it has its humorous side. You had to get rid of boots because army boots were not, well, you couldn't swim in army boots. And I eventually got rid of them. I came across a naval rating with 2 oars, 2 of the big lifeboat oars, and he put the ends under his armpits and I put the other ends under mine, and 6 hours later we were picked up. To have its humorous, inhuman touch, the officer in charge of the little motor torpedo boat that picked us up was Major Hayward, who Kingsley worked for in Gloucester for so long.
What time of day was it when the ship was blown
Exactly
up?
midnight.
So it was
Midnight,
pitch black,
pitch
presumably.
black, actually. And we were picked up as dawn was breaking. I think it was 5 minutes to 6.
But when you were in the water, you had no way of being sure that anyone would pick you up.
Not a clue.
So it must have been terrifying.
It was. There was no getting away from that.
And the sounds and sights of death all around you.
You couldn't see, but I've only got to shut my ears for 2 minutes and I can hear the sound, the noise that went on.
Was that the worst thing that happened to you, do you think, in the wartime?
Yes, although I had 3 very near misses. I had one in France when 4 of us were together. We were being plastered with mortar bombs, and you could hear them fired in the distance, and if you counted 10 then you ducked, you were out of the way. That was the time it took for the mortar bomb to reach you. We ducked. 2 of us went one side of a small hedge and 2 went the other. The 2 that went that way were blown to smithereens and we weren't touched. And I had one on Malta actually when we had a 1,000-pound bomb dropped in the dispersal area where we were in a slit trench, and we measured the crater afterwards, and from the edge of the crater to the edge of the slit trench was 12 feet, and we weren't touched.
Amazing, isn't it? Yeah, to look back on that. But
yes.
And obviously you are one of thousands of people
thousands, yes, there's
who've got
nothing,
those stories, but it doesn't.
yes.
Well, there's nothing perhaps unusual, but there is for you. I mean, it's still your story, and still means a lot for you and what you've seen, doesn't it?
I think perhaps what is most disappointing actually that I never see any of the old lads. I went back to one reunion dinner, but that was a real reunion dinner, and I didn't want another thickhead.
So anyway, let's go back to that. There you are in the middle of the water, there, and Major Hayward picked you up.
That's right.
Yeah.
We were one of 13 that little boat picked up. There's an interesting story behind that because they were members of the Long Range Desert Group who were travelling up and down the coast, stopping off here and doing a little bit of dirty work and a little bit of dirty work farther on. But Turkey, if you remember, was neutral, and they were only allowed just to touch in on the sides. When they'd gone back after their dirty work that night, they'd actually put all their camouflage netting up so they wouldn't be seen during the daylight, and purely by chance the wireless up on board pressed the button and he heard the Mayday, which was picked up from, or the SOS was picked up from the destroyer which was travelling with us. And they turned out, and they'd been out for quite a time. And they were actually on the way back when they spotted something which turned out to be us.
So they'd nearly given up?
They had given up, and they were on the way home. So,
gosh. So once again you were
chance in a million.
You were the right side of being saved. Eh?
Interesting, when we saw the boat, or when I saw the boat, because I was facing the right way, coming towards us through the, as dawn was breaking actually, it was almost as if it had a glow, a light, which was leading it. And when we were picked up, the light went out. And whether it was because it was a freak of the light, I don't think so. I think there was something else behind it. I think there was someone else who was guiding it.
Mm. Well, before that happened, when you were in the water, what were you doing? Were you preparing to die? Did you think you would?
To begin with, yes. I even went so far, oh blow it, I'm not going to try anymore, you know. And then I didn't like the water when it went over my head, so I came up again. But after that, no, I was convinced that we should be picked up.
Were you?
Yes.
Mm.
I was certain of that.
And then when were you picked up? What
we were
happened
picked
then?
up. We were taken. We were tied up with these long-range desert group boys for 24 hours, where they argued as to whether they should land us on Turkish soils and we'd be taken, well, not prisoners, internees, or whether we should go through to Leros the following night. Well, we went through to Leros the following night, and as orderly room sergeant, I automatically had a job awaiting me there, if only to find out who'd been drowned on board boat. I had two clerks travelling with me. They were both drowned. I'd left one behind in Alexandria, and he came by with the rear party, and we linked up about 3 days afterwards. He came through all right. But we had, what was Leros? It was a shambles from beginning to end. They'd landed troops on 3 islands in the Dodecanese, and the other 2 Jerry dropped paratroopers on and just cleared them up immediately. And of course it wasn't very long before he dropped paratroopers on that particular island. It was egg-shaped, and we were in the bottom half and Jerry was in the top half. And he had air support. He had everything that you could think of to support him. We had nothing, and he just came straight down through.
So what, they sort of more or less rounded you up, did they?
Rounded up, yeah.
And that's where you were taken
prisoner. Yeah.
And when was that? Which year was that?
That was in November. No, everything happened in 43.
Right.
That was in November. That was only 6 weeks after leaving Malta. We were, as you say, in the bag. We were transshipped from Leros to Athens, and we were put into a riding stable there. Something like 1,000 troops that had been gathered up from our unit in around, and we were held there for 3 weeks a month, I should think. And Jerry would occasionally take us out and walk us around the streets of Athens with cameras on every corner saying these are all the thousands of prisoners that we'd taken. You'd take another 1,000 on the next corner, of course, the same troops all over again. But it was very little happened there. But one thing did happen though, John, which has puzzled me and still does puzzle me. I was told to report to the dentist. My teeth were all right. I didn't want to go to the dentist. And in fact, I was taken down into Athens with an armed guard into the dentist shop. The dentist was an Air Force officer. He switched on his drill and just put it on the table. And he said, "Now I know you're off the Eclipse, HMS Eclipse. I know you lost quite a few lads and drowned and what have you. No, you've come from Lear. So I know all that. There's no, there's no propaganda about that at all. He said, if you'd like to let me have the names of those who have lost their lives that you know were killed, let me have them. I will see they get through to your colleague who was in Cairo. And with that he switched off his drill, told the guard I could go back, and I found I had an appointment for 3 days later. Went back to camp. We had a yarn with 2 sergeant majors who were in the unit. We came to a conclusion that nothing but good could come out of it, because the jury knew he'd drowned 1,000 blokes or 100 chaps. It wasn't going to make any difference to him, whereas it might help somebody else. So Freddie Bloomfield, my clerk, we endeavoured to compile as good a list as possible
of people who died.
People who we know were drowned.
Mm.
And then I reported sick again, and I found after the war that within 3 days that list had got to Cairo.
Really? Mm.
Now, who he was, this
He was
so-called
British.
dentist, yes,
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
British. Who he was,
Mm.
what he was, or what he was doing,
Mm.
how he got it through, I
Mm.
shall never know.